Welcome back, folks. We're jumping straight into it. This is a session I played 2 days ago over the win. 2-5, $1,500 max. So I sit with a max and we open a brand new table. The very first hand, I pick up pocket queens in the hijack. Open things up to $15, and then the button decides to raise it up to $50. Folds back to me, hijack versus button. This is a clear 4-bet. So I raise things up to $150 and my opponent makes the call. Off to a flop in this $300 pot on our very first hand, and it comes down 9-9-5, 2 clubs, 1 spade. Really nice board. With aces and kings, I could consider trapping. Queens, I think, is a pure bet here, so I fire up for 100, and my opponent folds. So pretty nice picking up that first pot. $150 up, the first hand. On to the next hand. A reg in the low jack has raised it up to 20, and I've got ace-10 of hearts in the small blind. Versus this large sizing, I'm definitely going to go for the 3-bet here, especially out of position, so I make things $80. Folds back to my opponent, and he puts in the 4-bet to 235. A little bit big for in position, but we are quite deep, and I actually randomized 50% shove it all in there. Just rip it for 300 big blinds and 50% call, and landed on call. So we were playing some post flop here, and we go to a flop of queen 9-8, 2 hearts, 1 diamond. Now I will say pre-flop, this is usually not I don't think you want to call here against most regs, but this player does have a very wide 4-bet range. Not many bluffs, but it's pretty easy to see what he has, as there aren't any bluffs. He's not going to have board coverage on a lot of boards. And as well, he's like, his 4-betting hands like ace-jack and pocket 10s, that wide. So it makes a little bit of sense against me, as I do have a pretty wide 3-bet range. But anyways, off to a flop of queen 9-8, 2 hearts, 1 diamond. Beautiful flop. We've got the over, the gut shot, the nut flush draw. I check it over, and now my opponent fires out a c-bet of 150. You think this is like a little bit surprising to see a c-bet here, but this opponent in 3-bet and 4-bet pots will c-bet any board 100% of the time for 33%. Doesn't matter what the board is, doesn't matter what his hand is. You don't really need to exploit this, right? They're going to exploit themselves just by doing that. They're going to arrive to the turn with a very weak range, and you're going to have a very narrow condensed range as you folded all your trash. But if you did really want to be a sicko, you could start to incorporate some king-queen and ace-queen type raises and just take it to the town. For 300 big blinds, you're getting it in, and you're going to be okay when you get stacked by aces and kings. But he's just not going to be able to defend that wide, and then you're going to use some no equity or very low equity bluffs like your 7-6 suited, 6-5 suited, pocket 7s, just hands that are like complete garbage and don't block his calling range, and just go nuts with those. But in this hand, I think, versus someone that's over c-betting, we got a pretty clear check raise here. This board is going to be so much better for me than it is for him. He's not going to pocket 9s, pocket 8s, jack 10 suited, queen 10 suited, queen jack suited, 10-9 suited, 10-8 suited, 7-6 suited. All those hands he's not going to have. We are going to connect so much better with this board than he is. And he's just going to be really stuck here unless he has an overpair or pocket queens. It's a rough board for him. And as well, he can't really have any flush draws here besides king jack of hearts. So this is like a dream spot to check raise. So I make it $500. My opponent thinks for a bit, and then makes the call. Pretty much going to shove almost any turn here. However, the turn is the brutal 9 of clubs. This is so gross. This is the worst card that we could see. My opponent's going to have more 9x than I am after he bet flop and then called, right? We've condensed his range a lot more than mine. But I lose so much value here, right? I'm down to 1 combo of 9-8 suited now. Pocket 9 is only 1 more combo of that. It's just getting rough, as well as I'm just drawing dead to full house now, the top set. So I think since losing so much value, I want to put my really strong bluffs that can still... I don't know. We're just going to do a lot of checking on this turn. So I check it over. My opponent tanks and checks behind. Off to the river, which is the king of spades. Brutal. Now we lose to so many hands. We're blocking the only hand, really, that can fold to a bet, pocket aces. And kings and queens are never folding. Ace kings probably not folding. So I'm just going to have to give this one up. It really sucks. So I check it over. And my opponent checks it back and shows pocket jacks. Oh, that one hurts. That's what I mean by he's c-betting 100% here. Like, it's not a good board for him. And jacks specifically do not want to bet here. Unfortunate that the board ran out like this. And we are going to lose a pretty big pot here. In this next hand, I've been moved to the main game, and it is a 2-5-10 game with mandatory not mandatory, but everyone straddling. So, playing 2-5-10 now. Under the gun is straddled. I raise the ace jack offsuit up to 25. By the way, we're only 5-handed here. Now cutoff raises to 100. Folds back to me and could call, could fold, could raise. They're all good. This time I decide to go for the 4-bet. I make it 270. Doesn't be too big as we're not too deep with a straddle. And my opponent makes the call. Off to a flop, which is just beautiful. Queen 10-7, all hearts. With 2 high cards in here that aren't the ace and king, I'm going to have a lot more nut flushes than my opponent. If this was a board like ace, king, 7, all monotone, it'd be much more desirable to start checking as I just don't have too many flushes after I 4-bet. But queen 10-7, I still have ace jack suited, ace king suited, ace 5, ace 4, ace 3, ace deuce, all of those, etc. So I fire out for 125, very small bets on these monotone boards, especially in 4-bet pots. And my opponent makes the call. Looking like 1 SPR, I'm probably going to go for small bet on the turn and river. However, the turn is the 9 of hearts. We do lose to jack 8 of hearts, but that is irrelevant. Same as 8-6 of hearts. A lot of my hands are going to want to check here, so I'm going to check with a nut flush sometimes to protect that. Having a jack blocks straight, so I think this is a nice hand to put in our check back range. So I check, and my opponent checks behind. Off to the river, which is quite nice. It's another heart. So now when I bet, it's going to look a little bit more like I'm trying to steal the pot, get him off a chop. So I could either go for the all-in, just really try and make him fold a chop, like a chop. Obviously, we're not chopping here, but make it look like that. But this time I decided to go for 400. I think this is enough to put his hands in a rough space that don't have a heart anyways. It's not a bad price to call. It's only 400 to win, the $400 back, so you only have to be good 50% of the time. Fortunately, my opponent does make the fold. I'm not going to get paid that one, but pretty happy to take down a pot like that with ace-jack offsuit. Okay, picking up 5-4 of clubs. The straddle is off, the game is full. A lot of the straddlers left, but I raise 5-4 suited in the low jack to $15. Player to my left makes the call. We go heads up to a flop of ace 8-7 rainbow. If I want to bet here, I want to bet a bit big. I thought the pot was $30, so I sized up to 20, but I keep forgetting to add the blinds. This bet should be about $30, but anyways, I bet 20, and my opponent makes the call. He's a recreational player, so I'm probably going to give up here. But the turn is the beautiful 6 of clubs, bang off our gutter, as well as pick up a flush draw just in case we're up against 9-10. But against this opponent, he's going to call super wide, and bet sizes don't matter, so exploitatively, I go for a bet of $85, slight overbet over the pot, and my opponent makes the call. We're off to a river, which is the jack of clubs. Doesn't change too much. I now do beat 10-9, which is nice. And now I just want to pick a sizing that my opponent is going to call. And I decided, I don't know how I came to this conclusion, but I just don't think he's going to call $400. So I fired out for $375. Opponent doesn't think for too long and tosses in the call. I show, and we're up against ace deuce. So I really like my line there, playing more exploitatively, and got max value. This is the hand. So low jack, who is a very good reg, has raised 15. There's a caller in early position, and now button is squeezed to $60. Now, I haven't played a hand in like 2 hours because the last 2 times the button is 3-bet, I had king 10 suited directly to his left and ace 4 suited, which I just had to fold. So I think a 33% frequency for a cold 4-bet sounds good with a hand like pocket eights. So I make it $200. It's totally fine to do with this stack depth very occasionally. Now low jack makes the call pretty quickly as well. And button also makes a call. Now, one thing to note, when the cards are being dealt, the button was dealt a king and it flipped over. So there's one king missing from the deck. So we go to a flop of king, king, jack, rainbow. I thought about this for a little bit. This board's going to be so much better for me. Low jack really isn't going to have ace king here. I reckon once the king gets flipped, he's just going to muck ace king. He's only got $15 invested and one of his outs is gone. So it makes his hand a little bit weaker. So I think he just tosses ace-king offsuit into the muck. So there's only really one combo of ace-king suited left. And button, how likely is it that he got dealt 2 kings? Not very. So I'm going to go for the c-bet. It can be very small here. The pot's already very big. So I make it 100. Low jack calls and button folds. So low jack is going to have hands like 10s through aces here. Sucks when you have pocket jacks, but he could have 10s, he could have queens. Maybe some ace-queen suiteds in there. So his range is quite strong here, but we go to a turn, which is the 9 of hearts. Now I got to pick some bluffs, and I really like my lowest pocket pairs on these boards. I can still boat up to beat a hand like aces and queens that like aces that trap pre. We're completely dead against jacks, which sucks, but we'll cross that bridge when we get there. But it's kind of tough to find bluffs here. Like, I've got ace queen suited, which could make a decent bluff, blocking aces, queens, king queen suited, ace king suited, which aren't too relevant, but I don't think that's enough because I'm going to have a lot of ace kings here. I'm still going to go for the 4-bet with ace king. I don't care that one flipped. Aces are still going to feel really good going for value knowing that a king flipped, as well as pocket jacks and some king jack suited. So I do have quite a bit of value, and ace queen is just not enough. So I like to pick my lowest pocket pairs here. Eights is going to be in there. SPR is looking around 3, so I want to bet around 80%. I think I bet way too small here. I bet like 2/3. I fired up for 550. Opponent's in the tank, and then calls. I'm getting a little worried that he's got pocket jacks or pocket aces now, as ace queen's gone. You know, he's got aces, queens, jacks now. Maybe 10s. But we're off to river. Planning to give up almost all rivers. However, the river is the 9 of clubs. Very interesting card. We do get counterfeit, but I don't think that matters. We weren't good anyways. But now pocket jacks may find a fold. At least that's what I thought in my head. Right? So I decided that on this run out, I am going to go for it. I fire $1,650 all in into the middle, and my opponent doesn't snap call. Thank God. So he's in the tank. He's in the tank. And this is probably the most stressful river, just sit there and stare, that I've ever been in. Waiting it out until my opponent ultimately decides to fold. Oh. We get that one through. My opponent said he had pocket queens, and my opponent also said that if he had jacks, he's never folding, so I kind of don't like my bluff now. I thought that some percentage of the time he may find a fold with jacks on this run out, but that one was scary. Okay, under the gun has raised it up to 20. There are 2 callers, and I look down at ace 10 of spades in the cutoff. Definitely putting the squeeze here. I make it 110 to go. 4 folding rounds to the big blind, who's a very, very good reg. We now cold 4 bets to 325. This folds out everyone in between, and now it's back on me. Over here, I randomized 50% all in, 50% call, and unfortunately landed on call. I guess that's more fun. So we are taken to the streets. I toss in the call, and we're off to a flop of queen 10-5, 2 clubs, 1 diamond. Interestingly enough, my opponent now checks it over to me. With ace 10 of spades here, just going to check this one behind and play some turns. Turn is the 4 of spades. Now my opponent fires out for $200. Nothing to do here but call. So I toss in the call. We're off to the river, which is the king of spades. My least favorite card. My opponent's good enough to check back like a hand like king jack suited on the flop, as well as some jack 9 suited, as well as ace king. So this card really hits him very hard. My opponent now fires all in for $875. And now I've got a decision. I came so close to just snap calling this, but I thought for a bit, and my opponent's definitely good enough to fire out for value with ace king here. So with that being in mind, that really sucks. If my opponent wasn't good enough to go for thin value with ace king, this would be a snap call. So I started looking at, he checked flop, and now shipping river. King jack's not going to feel good about that, as I do still have ace king in my range quite often. But he did start betting on the turn, so you start looking at like hands that want to bet on the turn. He does have those ace 3, ace deuce suited that picked up the wheel, gut shot on the turn. And I really like having spades here, as it doesn't block ace 4 of spades. So there's now 3 combos of that if he picked up a pair and decided to start bluffing with it. And because of that, I got really close to calling, like really close, just because the 4 was a spade and he started betting on the spade. So it's not that great. I do have a ton of better hands here. I will have straights, ton of straights, a lot of 2 pairs and some sets. Just a lot of really good hands here, so I don't need to call that much. So I just randomized here, 50-50 again. Looked down at my watch, and it was just so far away from call. So this time I make the disciplined fold. I wanted to call so bad, and we get shown the ace deuce of hearts. I was so close. So close to ripping in pre, so close to calling river. Well played by my opponent. That was a fun hand. On to the next. We are playing against the same opponent as before. He has raised the hijack to 15 and gotten 2 calls on the cutoff and the button. Pocket tens you could call here, but since the raise came from early position, I'm just going to squeeze this 100%, so I make it 95 to go. Hijack makes the call, and the other two fold. Off to a flop of ace 9-8, 2 clubs, 1 diamond. Not a board you want to be c-betting too frequently out of position, especially not with tens. Tens actually probably like to c-bet quite a bit here. Deny equity from king, queen, queen, jack, those kinds of hands. But I decided on a check here, and my opponent fires out a bet of $50. Really small, less than a quarter pot. We're going to have to call here, and we're off to the turn, which is the 7 of hearts. So we pick up an open-ender, I check it over, and now my opponent checks behind. Off to the river, which is the deuce of diamonds, pretty much. It is a blank. Biggest blank ever. I check it over, and now my opponent pots it for 325. A little bit tough here. He's not going for this size with ace-jack, as I can still have ace-queen in my range. So he's saying he has 2 pair plus, or most likely a straight. So I think with pocket tens and pocket jacks, we have to call here, and I can fold queens and kings pretty easily. Yeah, just having tens here is nice just to block the straights, as I think a hand like 10-9, 10-8 are just going to want to keep going for the bluff on the turn. So I decide to make the call this time. My opponent shows the 9-8. That is rough. Flop the 2 pair. I got bluffed and then got valued. Not going my way. All right, final hand of the session. Cutoff has limped to 5. I've been ISOing this player quite a bit. Not that I'm picking on him, just every time he's limped, I've had a good hand. So raise up to 25. Now small blind a reg makes it 95 in the small blind. Folds back to me, and button versus small blind, definitely going to go for the 4-bet here. So I make it $240 to go. My opponent doesn't think for long, and now 5 bets to 650. This is an insane sizing, right? Like, if I call, look at this. I've got, it's way over a third of my stack. Like, this sizing's just so bad, but I got just lost into, like, reg versus reg, button versus small blind. I need to call jacks. This is not a call. This man has not left himself any room to have any bluffs, because if I have aces here and I shove, he has to call off, right? He's only calling, like, $1,000 to win a pot that's going to be 3.2K. He can't fold. So he's left himself no room for bluffs. I should just fold here. His 5-bet needs to be around 430-ish, I think. Yeah, around 430, max $480, maximum. But should be close to 430, a 1.8x 5-bet out of position. I just got lost in, like, theory land and just, oh, I'm so frustrated. Like, he cannot have bluffs here. The worst hand he can have here is kings, and I don't even think he has kings here. He just has aces. Such a huge sizing, and I just couldn't get out of thinking exploitatively, or I just couldn't get out of thinking about theory, and I need to just be thinking about what are my opponents actually doing here. But I got lost. I make the call. I go to a flop of 10-9-4, 2 spades, 1 diamond. My opponent wastes no time in firing out another huge bet of $400. Like nearly 1/3 in a 5-bet pot. I'm like, what am I doing? And I'm just like, oh, it's a good price, I call. What am I doing? You guys can already tell what he has just from these sizings. And we go to the turn, which is the worst turn in the deck. One of them. It's the queen of clubs, giving me an open-ender. And now when my opponent snap shoves all in, he's never bluffing here, but I have to call, given the price. Right? We've got 10 outs to draw. Just so stupid. So I toss it in. River is the deuce of hearts, no help. And my opponent, guess what he had? Yeah, pocket aces. Even 2 days later, I'm so annoyed at the way I played this hand. Like, yeah. I took yesterday and today off poker just because if I'm not able to get away from this hand based on these sizings, I need some time to clear my head. But that's okay. We all make mistakes, and we learn from them. Thank you for watching the hands. That is it for me, fellas. That is episode 62. A very crazy session, a lot of tough spots. Didn't run too good, I was quite card dead, and only really got to value bet 2 rivers. Didn't make too many hands, just firing out a lot of bluffs. I said, you're good, probably like 50 times that session. I just couldn't help myself. I played the 1-3 while I was waiting for 2-5, and I won like $130 or something. I'll put it up there. And then I was in the 2-5 game for $2,000, out for goose egg, $0. I didn't feel like rebuying after that terribly played last hand, which is fair. you're not feeling it, just head away from the tables and take some time to rest. The videos are going to be a little bit less intro, a little bit less B-roll, as I'm just really enjoying putting in a lot of hours into the 2-5 game. Even though it is really tough, there is definitely action to have. These Vegas 2-5 games are no joke at all. My request to film at MGM is coming through, so hopefully see some Aria 2-5 and then some Bellagio 5-10 vlogs in the future, which I will edit properly with some nice B-rolls, check out the fountains, all that. But for now, that is it for this episode. I hope to see you guys in the next one. Thank you so much for watching.